We have a couple of questions here. So one is really we're going to start with perspectives on AI. And I know in a recent interview, you had stated that AI will handle 80% of the work and 80% of the jobs. And I think the folks here in the room would really love for you to elaborate, on that statement and the implications of, employment and society at large.
The overall perspective on AI I would give you is it's one kind of beast when you look at 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 years. It's a different kind of beast between 10 and 20. And then if you look to 25 years and beyond, it's a completely different animal. And I've just recently finished a piece which will be on our website called AI, Dystopia or Utopia. And it addresses most of these questions. And I address all the reasons and all the critique one AI gets from a dystopian vision of what might happen, and my perspective on how you can avoid it. I won't go through the piece here, it'd take too long. It's 25 pages long. And so let me warn anybody who attempts to read it. I have a very short form version of it coming pretty soon. But even that is probably 5 pages or so. But there are genuine concerns with dystopia on AI, but most of them can be addressed by the choices society makes, especially in a democratic society like ours. But let me focus and I then go to the utopia side, what might happen. And in each time frame, it's different, but my personal thesis is GDP growth goes from 2% to 5% or something like that. It's not a precise number. Right. And that's a huge boon for society. If you take a 25 or 50-year period, it sort of becomes a big benefit, and it creates great abundance. Part of that, and part of the way that abundance is created, is most expertise in the world will sit in an AI. And so that will replace most jobs because AI will be able to do those jobs much better. And as a swag, I picked 80% of all jobs. So 80% of jobs and 80% of each of those jobs. So that would translate to 64% of jobs effectively that exist today. Now, we've gone through large transitions in jobs before. Agriculture was 40-some% of all jobs in the US. By 1970, it had gone from 40-some% to 4%. So large transition. The problem is this time it'll happen in one generation. That particular transition took probably 3 generations to happen. And so adjustment would be difficult. So that's my overall perspective. I can go deeper into any of these, if you like, but I'll let you ask the questions.
I think one of the questions was, do you believe that AI will sort of more augment intelligence or replace it? And I think maybe you sort of answered that question, but it'd be helpful to get some elaboration on that.
Well, the thing to remember is AI systems are moving very, very rapidly in capability. I was at OpenAI yesterday, and we all know about LLMs. The new model is a reasoner system. So reasoning becomes within their capability. And my bet is reasoning capability will grow dramatically over the next year or two. Next is agents that can actually do work for other people. So you can ask it to do tasks, whether it's personal tasks like, hey, make sure I'm getting to my meeting on time. That simple statement means my agent has to look my calendar, see what I need, where do I need to get to, what's the address, go to Google Maps, look up the travel time on my to my destination, call an Uber maybe and say how long does an Uber take to get here. So it's a bunch of planning stuff, and an agent will be able to do that. Or on the business side, it could be claims processing, for example, since you have a number of insurance execs, or healthcare diagnosis, or any of those kinds of tasks. After that comes AI scientists. I think we'll see that also happen in the relatively near term, like next 2 to 3 years, where they can actually complement scientists. And of course, at some point, as Sam Altman likes to say, we will be able to have whole organizations in an AI system and then do the work of that organization. So these are the 5 levels OpenAI talks about. So that's an overall perspective. Now, just so I don't scare people, the next 5 years, maybe 10, but probably 5, will look like every person you have in any kind of knowledge worker, they can get 5 AI interns. So if you're a software engineer, you get 5 interns as your personal software AI interns. If you're a claims adjuster, you get 5 AI interns doing the job for you. If you're a physician, you get 5 AI fresh MDs. And so think in terms of adding capacity where the human being is supervising the work. So one physician can do less work than 5 AI interns for a physician, but the human can oversee their work and approve their diagnosis, for example, or a prescription. So that model, I think, is pretty relevant for the next 5 years, possibly the next 10 years, and it will vary by field based on how critical the field is. Will do human oversight for longer. So that's a good model. Economically, at the economy level, it'll feel like productivity improvements. Years 10 on, you start to actually replace a lot of these jobs with these AI interns. You know, when you have a fresh Harvard MD, a physician can use them, and they will like an AI. And in 5 years, they get good enough, definitely in 10, and they can operate on their own without supervision. And that's what will happen with these AI agents. And so 10 plus years on, you start to actually see dramatic reduction in jobs. And then you get to an area where people don't need to work 20 plus years forward. I fundamentally believe the need to work will go away. People will work, but if they want to work on and only on the things they want to work on. So that's a utopian vision of great abundance driven by productivity growth and accelerating GDP growth. So let me stop there.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that vision. Very interesting the way you call the utopian and dystopian vision. It brings some interesting parallels because we've seen mechanization, industrial revolution, where one supervisor could supervise many, and then eventually we had robotics and machines. So in the manufacturing space, It's been happening, and so it's very interesting to draw that parallel here. I'd love to go around the room. Some of the folks here in the room want to ask you some questions.
I might let me add one more thing since you brought up robotics. Mostly what I'm talking about is knowledge workers and software systems. I think we're probably 3, 4, 5 years away from what happened to ChatGPT in 2022. It came on the scene and people started using it and then believing it. It became global. Almost everybody had heard of it. 250 million people using it today. All pretty stunning. Robotics, especially bipedal robots that look and feel like us and can do physical labor, are probably 3 to 5 years away to prove they can happen. and then probably they'll start deploying in large quantities, like millions of units 10 years from now. And my bet is in 20 or to 25 years, we'll have 1 billion of them that can do more labor, whether it's farm work, assembly line work, or household work. They can do more work than all of humanity today can, because they work 24/7, they don't get tired, they'll operate that way. And labor will become near free. So 2 consequences that are really important. First, most expertise will be free. A farm worker will be able to access as much expertise as an oncologist or a structural engineer or a salesperson or a marketing person. And there'll be AI versions of all these. So that'll happen first. Expertise becomes free. And then that will start to happen with human labor. You might have economies 25 years from now, and it'll be society by society choice, and countries will choose to do this or not. And I'm talking more about capability than adoption. But in 25 years, you need very little work from humans to produce much more output, which is abundance. And then things like universal basic income become feasible because the GDP growth isn't related to the number of people working. And so you'll see discontinuities in productivity measures and GDP growth measures. Anyway, so let me go back to, you were going to ask the students a set of questions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that lens, GDP growth, not being tied in the future to labor costs because it goes down, and, productivity as it goes up. So that's a very interesting lens in expertise, and then human labor becoming free. So we have here Shekhar in the room. Please introduce yourself. And
Vinod, thanks for taking the time. This is Shekhar Panala from the Hartford. It's a 2-part question. One is, given the capital constraints for large language models that only few companies can afford, are you worried about the fundamental research that can happen or will not happen in the universities? That's the first question. The second question is, as you think about agentic evolution, agentic architecture evolution, do you see another architecture beyond transformers, whether it is neurosymbolic or state space models? Is there another version of Gen AI?
Great question. I think we're getting to a point where large-scale language model development at universities is no longer feasible. Everybody can use what's available on the web openly, the web crawl, but there's billions of dollars being spent on proprietary content. So I don't know if anybody's approached you and said, I'd like all of Hartford's data, and this is how much I'll pay you for it. And generally millions of dollars, and across developing a full model, probably billions of dollars of proprietary data, which wouldn't be shared with universities and is paid for by the large players. There's billions of dollars being spent or will be spent on training a single model. You might have $100 million run that just completely breaks and doesn't produce anything. So this level of spending is not possible at the university level. In fact, it's not possible in most countries, just given their resources. Some countries can do it, but only a few. So that's sort of, I think, university research. Now, what can university research do? They can absolutely do a lot of research on safety systems, for example. So there'll be niche areas where there's a lot for universities to do. Safety is one of the more important ones. That's one example. But even the idea of what comes next after transformer models, which was the second part of your question, is something only universities will do. Maybe a few small startups. It's not the big guys doing those. Google's not doing it. OpenAI, they're betting on the transformer model today, and a few other things like RLHF, and I won't go through all the jargon. But the thing to keep in mind is there are startups that are doing other approaches like neurosymbolic approaches. Like one I'm very excited about in our portfolio is called Symbolica. And they're using an esoteric piece of math called category theory and saying with that, can you get many thousands of fold improvement in either the efficiency or the quality of the reasoning of AI systems? Now, my current guess would be, and there's a couple of other approaches. There's a theory of brain science started by a guy called Carl Preston on the brain. The human brain is an energy minimization system while minimizing prediction errors. So that's sort of his thesis. That is a startup. There's others like that are non-transformer model startups. And that, I think, will keep flourishing and people will try new things. I'm hoping one of those becomes successful. My bet is something will be successful in conjunction with LLMs to expand their capability, make them more secure, more less hallucination, or more reasoning power, or much less energy consumption. So, the example I always give is an LLM, you give it two numbers to multiply, it can do that. And sometimes it makes a mistake and it hallucinates. But if an LLM knows it can call a simple calculator, then it knows it can do it energetically much more efficiently and always be accurate. And that's a classic example of AI agents being tool calling agents. Like humans can use tools, AI agents will be able to use tools for special purposes. So if you want to run a simulation of something, you can do it in an LLM, or you could call a tool that does that specifically. So that's the way I would look at it, and I don't think we are done with architecture innovation, and I don't think transformers is the last thing we see.
Thank you, Vinod, for that lens. Moving to a different topic on ethical considerations around AI and regulation, what principles should be guiding the ethical development, and what sort of advice would you give to regulators regarding AI? Because you obviously want things to move fast and go better for business.
Yeah. First, I'm a fan of close monitoring. I'm not a fan of early regulation. So, from my point of view, we should be very careful and monitor, but not slow development down. Now I'll come back to that topic. The ethics of what happens, I think, will be societal choices. I address various kinds of things that are considered ethical issues in my long paper, and so I'd recommend people read it because it's too long to go through here. In terms of topics like surveillance and monitoring of human beings, I think within country you can have laws. We have laws, we will expand that, or what is legal or what's not. So California just last week, Governor Newsom signed a law that says you can't clone a person and use their clone for your purposes. So it's mostly meant for actors in Hollywood, but that's an example of that their likeness belongs to them and you can't use it. Faking people out, I think pretending to be a human when it's a robot, that probably should be illegal. But these are societal choices. They're not inherent in the AI systems. Now, you can have laws within a country. The biggest danger we face is if China or an adversarial nation like China, Russia, North Korea, or Iran starts to use this technology, there's very little protection against that. But whether we apply the regulation in the US or not won't slow down Chinese development. And so I think the only protection against that is our AI is faster, better, stronger, more intelligent than their AI, and we can detect those. I'm also pretty optimistic. There's a large startup opportunity in creating personal agents for every human being. Definitely in the example I'm giving for every US citizen that protects them from other AI that might try and get them to do things as TikTok does, or somebody trying to sell them something, so their AI will advise them or protect them. So I do think people have personal AIs that can fight the marketeers and others.
So that's a very interesting lens, Vinod, because earlier in the day we were talking about some of the future models, like the buyer's agent, which would sort of sit on the buyer's side in Delta learners.
Yes.
So thanks for sharing that lens. I'm just wondering if anyone else in the room. Yes, Jim, please.
Jim Young from AIG. So with the scenario plays out that in a number of, let's call it decades, 64% of the jobs no longer need to be performed, the GDP's at 5% or better. And if nobody's working, what does that mean for democratic and capitalism and democratic societies? Do we have to potentially become socialists now? And how does
Well,
that?
it depends on what you mean by socialists.
Okay.
I think those definitions are old. I think there'll be enough abundance to assure minimum levels of standards of living in society, and everybody will be assured all the basics, and probably enough universal basic income to take care of all your healthcare, or education, or housing kinds of needs. Beyond that, I think some people will want to make more money, and they'll, a Taylor Swift won't be replaced by an AI. That's a celebrity. Celebrity is a very human phenomenon. Ego is a very human phenomenon. Competition, winning at the Olympics, those are all very human characteristics, and the human brain isn't going to change in 3 decades. And so humans will strive for things on their own, free of the constraints of needing to make a basic living. And I would submit to you, most jobs on the planet, definitely in the US, shouldn't be called jobs. They should be called servitude. If you get to work as a farm worker for 30 or 40 years, 8 hours a day, whether the temperature is 50 degrees or 110 degrees, or you have to work 8 hours a day mounting a tire on a car on the GM assembly line for 30 or 40 years, that's servitude. That's not a respectable human job. But will I still do what I want, which is what I'm doing today, which is incubate new ideas and see what else we can make happen? I will. Others will be competing in skiing or equestrian, or humans love competition, humans love celebrities, but there will be lots of ways and lots of more creative ways to make additional income if you want it, or additional ego gratification. Both will be available.
It seems like the benefactors of all of this are primarily going to be the large tech companies that are investing in this now. So how is that basic income going to make its way to the folks that no longer have to work from those companies?
Well, first, I don't think it'll be just those tech companies. I think there'll be many more people involved. We wouldn't have invested in 100 companies if we thought it would all go to OpenAI and Google. I do think there's lots more room to innovate and engage people and produce goods and services. But also, I think that's where democracy will put a hold on sort of the capitalism, whether it's caps on size or valuations or other redistribution mechanisms, which is a bad word today. I think it will be a necessity in society, and an election in 2040 will be fought on who has a better redistribution plan, not who can cause the largest economic growth, which is sort of the vector today of elections. So I do think democracy will control capitalism. I think capitalism will be forced. Capitalism has generally been a mechanism of economic efficiency and a fabulous one, and I'm a huge fan of it. And you can see the difference between North Korea and South Korea when you want to look at the impact of capitalism. But economic efficiency will not be the major vector when you have a lot of abundance. There'll still be physical things, like we still need copper and steel. Now there'll be AI that finds much more copper and steel than we can discover today, along with other sciences, sensors, etc. So I suspect availability of minerals, lithium, copper, will go up 10, 20x, far more than demand. And their prices will also decline, which is not what the current forecasts are, because they're not based on AI discovery. By the way, exactly the same thing happened in the 1960s in oil. We declared peak oil, which is we declared there was an incentive to discover new oil, and much more oil was discovered and has continuously been discovered. Same thing will happen to physical resources like metals and minerals. But I do think policy will play a large role in the redistribution or distribution of benefits from AI. Today we have regulations of what banks can and can't do. If they're a bank, they can't do certain things, they can't do other things. There'll be regulations in AI also.
Before we take another question, there's two more questions in the room. Before we take that, you touched upon policy. I know we're kind of out of time with you. I hope you don't mind going a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I am out of time. I actually have to go catch a flight, but I'll take one last question.
Okay, go ahead, Mitesh.
Hi, Vinod. So this is Mitesh. I'm an entrepreneur from India. I'll not ask you an AI question. I'll ask you a VI question. Vinod's intelligence. I am more interested in that. So what keeps you motivated at this stage and age of your life? I'm really inspired. I read you a lot of stuff. I watch you a couple of videos as well.
The answer is simple. So since we have short time, I turned 70 in January, and I've used Warren Buffett as a model to say I plan to do this for the next 25 years if I'm healthy. The question you're asking is why. I don't like golfing. I'm having a lot more fun doing what I'm doing than I would at golf or sailing or pick your favorite. I'm learning every single day, and I'm frankly addicted to learning. The best scientists, whether they're AI scientists or climate scientists or biology scientists or medicine scientists, come educate me every single day. There's nothing more exciting than that. And people will find different motivations in this AI abundant world. Somebody will want to perfect their surfing and compete in surfing. So there will be a lot to do, a lot more time available for caring for children. People don't spend enough time raising their children because they have dual income families and the realities of paying for the mortgage. I think there will be plenty of things for humans to do and plenty of intrinsic motivations. My motivation is intrinsic. I love learning. Thank you all very much.
Vinod, thank you so much for being here, and we really appreciate you being at NYU, and we'd love to see you in person next time. And is there any parting thought you have or comment for us? Like, what should we be thinking about as executives, or what is the questions we should be asking that we didn't ask you?
I think there's a paper which is a little too technical, so I wouldn't recommend it, but it's called Situational Awareness. And it argues that in 10 years, most businesses can be radically reinvented, and the current models of business will be obsolete. Every executive should be thinking of what's possible in 10 years and what can you do the next 3 years or 5 years, preparing for what might be happen in 10 years. So be aware, nobody is estimating the tsunami of AI capability coming our way, and we should be planning for it as corporate executives.